The Galactic Military Academy's survival course was designed to break cadets. Commander Zixth watched from the observation deck as 47 species' finest specimens navigated the harsh terrain of Kepler 442c. The Vorthak cadets moved with predatory grace, their 6 limbs carrying them effortlessly across jagged rocks. The crystalline Nexari floated above obstacles with natural anti-gravity organs. Even the diminutive Squeep demonstrated impressive agility, their 3 hearts pumping efficiently in the thin atmosphere. And then, there was Marcus Chen, the human, stumbled over a root, caught himself on a boulder and paused to wipe sweat from his brow. At 5'7" and barely meeting minimum physical requirements, he was easily the weakest cadet in the cohort. His pale skin was already sunburned despite the UV protection, and his breathing labored in air that most species found refreshing. Pathetic, muttered Cadet Vorthak, a 7-foot Vorthak whose species had conquered 3 star systems before joining the Galactic Union. How did that thing even qualify? The other cadets chuckled, their various forms of laughter creating a discordant symphony. They didn't know that Marcus could hear them perfectly well with his primitive but surprisingly acute hearing. The course was simple in concept. Survive 72 hours in hostile territory while evading the apex predator, a bioengineered creature designed to hunt and eliminate threats. It had never killed a cadet, but many had been severely injured before emergency. Extraction. The creature would select its primary target based on perceived weakness. Marcus knew he would be chosen. The math was simple. On the second day, as the cadets made camp in a rocky outcropping, the apex predator struck. The creature was a masterpiece of bioengineering, 12 feet of corded muscle, adaptive camouflage, and lethal intelligence. Its sensory organs could detect heartbeats from a kilometer away, and its claws could rend through most known materials. It observed the camp for hours, analyzing each cadet's capabilities. The Vorthak were too aggressive and well-armed. The Nexari could simply float to safety. The insectoid Klaxon had natural armor plating that would prove troublesome. But the human was perfect prey. The predator struck at dawn, its roar shaking the canyon walls. Cadets scattered in every direction, except Marcus, who seemed frozen in terror as the creature approached. Its adaptive camouflage flickered as it prepared to pounce on the easy target. What happened next would be studied in xenobiology classes. For decades, Marcus didn't run. Instead, he did something the predator's programming couldn't account for. He grabbed a handful of the fine, rust-colored sand and threw it directly at the creature's primary sensory cluster. The predator, momentarily blinded, stumbled backward with a confused shriek. "That's right, ugly," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the mortal terror in his eyes. "You picked the weakest one, but you know what makes humans weak? We compensate." The predator, enraged and confused, charged. Marcus dove aside, not with alien grace or supernatural speed, but with the desperate efficiency of a species that had survived ice ages, predators, and their own worst instincts through nothing but stubborn refusal to die. The creature's claws raked across rock where Marcus had been. By the time it turned, the human was already moving, using the terrain in ways the predator hadn't anticipated. Marcus wedged himself between 2 boulders where the larger creature couldn't follow, forcing it to attack from predictable angles. For 6 hours, the deadly dance continued. The predator was faster, stronger, and better armed. But Marcus was something it had never encountered, desperately creative. He used mirrors made from shattered crystal to blind it. He triggered rock falls to slow its advance. He even used his own sweat, acidic compared to most species' perspiration, to etch handholds in smooth surfaces. The other cadets watched in growing amazement as the weakest among them turned the tables on their tormentor. The predator, designed to hunt based on perceived strength and threat level, found itself increasingly frustrated by prey that refused to behave logically. "He's not trying to defeat it," observed Cadet Zilara, her 4 eyes tracking Marcus's movements. "He's trying to exhaust it." She was right. While other species might rely on natural weapons or abilities, humans had evolved something far more dangerous: endurance hunting. Marcus was treating the apex predator like his ancestors had treated mammoths, not as something to overpower, but as something to outlast. By the third day, the predator was showing signs of fatigue. Its strikes were less precise, its roars less intimidating. It had never faced prey that could match its endurance while simultaneously using intelligence to multiply effectiveness. Marcus, meanwhile, had turned the entire canyon into his weapon. Every rock, every shadow, every thermal vent had been cataloged and weaponized. When the predator finally cornered him against a cliff face, it found itself looking up at a human who had spent the night weaving a net from native vines. The trap, when it sprung, was beautiful in its simplicity. The predator, lunging for what it thought was certain victory, instead found itself tangled and tumbling down a carefully prepared slope, lined with sharp stones. Not enough to seriously injure the creature, but enough to make it reconsider its choice of prey. Commander Zixith watched through his sensors as the apex predator, for the first time in its operational history, retreated from a target. The human had done something unprecedented. He had convinced an engineered apex predator that he was more trouble than he was worth. "Remarkable," the commander whispered through his translator. The weakest cadet just taught the strongest predator a lesson in persistence. When the extraction teams arrived, they found Marcus sitting calmly on a boulder, fashioning a spear from local materials despite the fact that the danger had passed. "Just in case," he explained to the bewildered medical team. Later, in the ISO Academy's halls, Marcus would become something of a legend, not because he was the strongest or fastest, but because he had demonstrated something uniquely human, the ability to turn weakness into strength through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat. The apex predator was reprogrammed after the incident. Its new target selection criteria included a special notation: exercise extreme caution when engaging human subjects. Species demonstrates unpredictable tactical adaptation and concerning levels of persistence. Marcus graduated middle of his class and went on to serve with distinction. He never spoke about the canyon incident, but his fellow officers noticed something. Whenever they faced impossible odds, Marcus would smile that same quiet smile he'd worn while staring down a bioengineered killing machine. Because sometimes, being the weakest meant being the most dangerous of all.